Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Meaningful People Podcast. Your host Nachi Gordon here, and boy, is this a good one. I spoke to Rabbi Yehoshua Soudakoff, the deaf rabbi. This rabbi has been deaf his entire life, and he is the rabbi to the deaf community in Eretz Yisrael, but beyond that, abroad, online, teaching classes, translating Torah through sign language. An amazing story, and this idea to do this episode really came to me when I was by the Knesset Shluchim with my brother, and Rabbi Soudakoff got on stage and started, and it was just silent. Obviously, he cannot speak, and he was signing a speech, and it was just remarkable. You know, the silence, but the message being portrayed. Of course, he had someone who was, translating for him, but it was really incredible. And I think this episode is really gonna, teach you a lot that maybe you didn't know. Of course, in this episode, we have somebody that's speaking for him as he is signing. So if you're listening, you're gonna hear a voice of a translator. If you're watching, you're going to see Rabbi Soudakoff signing and mouthing some words. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. This episode, first of all, Bloom's is the official food sponsor of Meaningful People. How awesome is that? All the gum they have in my studio and the snacks, the kichlach. Come on, guys. This is the OG snacks for Pesach. And my friends, got to get your hands on those kichlach. Thank you so much, Bloom. Okay, my friends, you want to win $200 by commenting down below on this episode. $200 goes a long way during Pesach season. Well, here it is. You need to guess. We're having a special guest coming to our studio next week to record an episode of the podcast. You need to guess down below who it is. Just by guessing, you'll be entered to win. And if you actually guess who they are, maybe we'll send you a Meaningful People game on us. Okay. But the first one, not all of you, the first. So make sure you comment quick, comment right now. Who do you think is coming to our studio next week? Special guest. Am I going to give you a hint? I don't think so. Not now. This episode is sponsored by my friends at PZ Deals. Yes, Pesach is right around the corner, and there's so many things to order. Maybe you want to blowtorch your entire kitchen, right? Maybe you need tinfoil. Maybe you need like a lot of tinfoil. Where are you getting that stuff? You're going to search on Amazon? That's no fun. You want to make sure that you're going to go to PZ Deals and get the best deal possible. Blowtorch, I don't know if they're going to have that on there, but tinfoil for sure. Make sure to go on the PZ Deals app. Download it if you don't have it already, but go on there and make your notifications. Customize those notifications. If there's a price drop in tinfoil, you want to jump all over that. Maybe like Saratoga water. Go ahead and make a price notification to alert you when Saratoga water is on sale or there's a price drop. This all happens when you have the PZ Deals app. So go ahead and download the app today in the App Store and never pay full price again. This episode is also sponsored by my friends at Leman Achai. Financial hardship is like being stuck in quicksand. Freedom feels very far away when your fridge is empty, and every night is spent worrying about overdue bills. Crushing debt, hopelessness, the weight is unbearable. The pressure, constant. The stress, relentless. Leman Achai aren't just giving handouts to struggling families. They are lifting them up and accompanying them to freedom. Through financial training, career counseling, and an entire professional team providing full support, they replace despair with dignity, hardship with hope, and dependence with independence. Imagine the freedom. A Pesach table, beautifully set. A family sitting together, secure, with peace of mind, a bright future, and dignity. This Pesach, you have the ability to set a family free. Make a donation today to Leman Achai. Hit the link in the show notes below. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode of the podcast. Alrighty, I am joined today by Rabbi Yehoshua Soudakoff and his interpreter, Nanette. So thank you guys for joining us, for joining myself and having this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. And I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Of course, I want to start off by, framing the conversation. For those who are watching, it's quite obvious that this is not the typical interview. You have a rabbi sitting there, and the voice that's coming across the microphone is one of not a rabbi, not even a man. It's a woman. So, I guess just putting it frankly, we are interviewing Rabbi Yehoshua Soudakoff, who is a rabbi for the deaf community. And I want to peel it back to, I guess, childhood. It's my understanding that Rabbi Soudakoff was born deaf. And for those who are listening and hearing these words right now that I'm saying, they can't even comprehend what that even means to not be able to hear. So from Rabbi Soudakoff, if you can tell us, Rabbi, and give over in some terms to the listeners, what was your upbringing like not being able to hear?
So before I answer that question, I want to give you a framework for the question. There are all kinds of deaf people. 10% of Americans have some kind of hearing loss. Most people, it's because of age. They've lost their hearing over time. And in that group of 10%, there are also people like me who were born deaf. And most deaf people have hearing parents. It's a very small group of deaf people who have deaf parents. And that's what I'm part of. My parents are deaf, and I'm deaf, and my brothers and sisters are deaf also. So I was born into a silent world. Just like you said, I've never had an experience of hearing. And people ask me if I have hearing loss, and I say, no, I didn't lose my hearing. I never had it in the first place.
That's really incredible. I imagine that it was maybe even a little easier being born into a whole family that was deaf, as opposed to having parents and siblings who were able to hear, and then you would be left out. You guys were all on the same page.
Exactly. Yes. My parents both grew up with hearing homes, and their parents didn't know how to sign. And it's a different challenge than challenge that I had growing up in a deaf family.
So when it came to, I guess, integrating, going to school, having friends, what was that like?
So my school was really a special school because I had a classroom with 1/3 of the students were deaf and 2/3 were hearing, but they knew how to sign. So we learned together in the same school, in the same class, and the teacher both spoke and signed at the same time. And that was my elementary education. When I was going to middle school, we had an interpreter all day. And that point, in middle school, I started to look for my Jewish identity. And I wanted to go to a Jewish school. So that's when I started my process of my Jewish journey. So
I guess up until that point, what was your connection with your Yiddishkeit? Were you religious? Were you guys keeping Shabbos or not really?
My parents are traditional. My mother is from LA and my father's from New York. And my grandfather, he grew up in Israel. And we had that traditional background. We had Friday night dinner. We kept all the holidays. But we were not religious. And when I was coming close to my bar mitzvah, I had a private lesson with a speech therapist who prepared me for reading from the Torah. And also she taught me some Hebrew. And that time I started to really connect to my Jewish identity and on a deeper level.
Well, what was it, I guess, about that process that made you want to diverge from what your family was doing up until that point religiously and say, you know what, I want to be religious. I want to go all in on this. I'm a very curious person. And when I want to learn something, I go all the way. And I really connected to, I felt like there was so much knowledge, there was a wealth of traditions that I never knew growing up. And even though I'm Jewish and from a Jewish family, it was out there and I never had an opportunity to connect to it. So that was now what I grasped that opportunity. So growing up in the internet, there is more Chabad.org and many different websites that were starting to show so much knowledge. So much knowledge was accessible. And in my parents' time, if you wanted to learn about Judaism, you had very few things on this. You could go to books on the shelf or you could go to synagogue, but it wasn't accessible for deaf people. For me, it was a different generation. I guess I'm having trouble really to even understand or comprehend how somebody, how does it work with sign language in different language? Is there a difference with signing when it comes to English? Now you say you're learning Hebrew. What does that look like? Explain that to me, our listeners.
Every language has its own sign language. I grew up using American Sign Language. Right now, I'm speaking to you using American Sign Language, ASL. And in Israel, we use Israeli Sign Language. And each country has its own sign language. And English, in England, they use British Sign Language. It's called BSL, British Sign Language. And each country has its own signs for words and a different vocabulary, and each sign language grew independently in the place that it is used. So when I was in Yeshiva in Toronto, I'll talk to you a little bit about that later. I used a mix of Israeli Sign Language for Hebrew words and ASL for English words, and we created new signs also for words from the Gemara.
That's really amazing. That's really incredible. To be able to have to learn ultimately multiple languages, but just different signs. I don't know. I'm like thinking if there could be one universal sign language, I'm sure that would make things easier. But just the same way there's not one universal spoken language, I imagine it's the same for sign language.
Exactly.
Right.
First, do that. First, make a language, one language for all spoken languages, and then speak to me about making one for sign language.
When you were saying about like there's British Sign Language, obviously Brits, they speak English. So I was just thinking like really maybe they use some different words here and there, but the real differentiator of British is the accent. But is there signs that give over that accent maybe? That's what I'm curious about. More jokingly.
Yes, there are accents for signs, but for British Sign Language, it really grew independently from it grew in England. So you have to remember sign language is about 100 years old. So people who lived in America, when people in America wanted to create a sign language, they didn't contact the Brits and ask them how they made their sign language. They just made their own. So a language grows in the place where people are trying to use it. Right.
And you mentioned that you were getting ready for your bar mitzvah and you were learning Hebrew. Maybe were you learning even the Parsha? Was that something that you started to do?
Yeah. That was my first time reading from the Torah. Understanding what Torah was all about.
Wow. And did you lane with sign language at your bar mitzvah?
No, with my voice. I practiced months. I practiced for that. But yeah, I laned at my bar mitzvah.
That's amazing.
And I also read at the Western Wall.
Wow. Speak to me about this yeshiva that you went to in Toronto. Nefesh David, I believe, is the name. Tell me about your experience there and what took place.
So it's the only yeshiva for deaf boys who know sign language. It's in Toronto, Canada, and it started about 25 years ago. And so I joined in 2005. And before that, I was looking for a Jewish school, a high school in LA. And I went to different high schools and I interviewed, and they all accepted me, but they said, we don't have money to pay for an interpreter. So you have to decide if you want to come and you'll just figure out how to understand the classes without an interpreter. And I realized that that's not what I wanted. So I started to think about going to that yeshiva, even though it was the other side of the country. It was even a different country. Yeah. And I went to visit and I was hooked. It was my first time seeing people who were the same age, deaf Jews, and they all wanted to be religious and connect to Judaism. And it blew my mind. Until that point, all the Jewish deaf people that I knew were my parents' friends or some young people who didn't really care about Judaism. And here I had a group of people who were motivated, wanted to learn Gemara. I wanted to be part of that group. So I joined for 3 years. They were the 3 best years of my life. Not only did I learn in yeshiva, I also learned what it means to be part of a community. And I grew up in a deaf community, but I was disconnected from the Jewish community. I never had that connection or the opportunity to go to be part of Jewish events in the community. And in Toronto, we had that opportunity. The yeshiva really encouraged us, encouraged families to invite us for meals, Shabbos meals, and we joined a lot of the community events. And I felt part of that community. And I understood the power and the value of being part of something bigger. That was really a wonderful experience.
Prior to going there, it sounds, and you can confirm this for me, it sounds like many people part of the deaf community shy away from public spaces or even interacting because of the maybe frustration that comes out of trying to communicate and not being able to. Is that the case? And it sounds like with this yeshiva, with this community, it really changed your entire life.
Yes. Yeah. I have friends who went with me to yeshiva, and they were ready to welcome us. The families that we went to, it was a different experience. That experience showed me that it's possible. That kind of integration can happen in other places in the world. If people want to integrate deaf people, there is a way to do it. And that we saw in Toronto.
Is it in Toronto where you're learning Gemara and then all of a sudden you guys start creating signs for the terms in Gemara?
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. If you have no signs, you have to create a sign.
Wow. And who is the person responsible for creating those signs?
It just happens. You're signing. They were signing before I came. Everyone was signing. Other boys were creating signs. And our Rosh Yeshiva, he was also deaf himself. And he was part of that creative process.
That's amazing. After leaving Toronto, you're going back into a world that isn't necessarily the same as Toronto, where it's that close-knit deaf community, everyone's understanding each other. You chose to go back to Los Angeles, correct?
Right.
What went into that decision, and what did you meet there?
I graduated. They said, bye, go home. I continued my Jewish education in LA. I went to college, and there were 2 years there that I was looking for what to do with my life. I was 18, and I was deciding what my future career should be. And I realized that I wanted to become a rabbi. And that brought me to New York.
What were your parents? I guess what did your parents think about that? Growing up in a traditional home, hey, Mom, Dad, I want to be a rabbi.
They thought I was crazy, but they don't think so anymore. Yes, it was hard for them to accept. Also, part of going to rabbinical school meant that I was joining a program without an interpreter and completely inside a hearing environment all day. And they were worried about me. Your all life, you've been inside the deaf world, and now you're jumping into the hearing world without an interpreter. Are you going to be okay there? Are you going to have friends? And it really was hard. It was not easy.
So which community did you choose to go to New York?
I went to the Yeshiva in New York in Crown Heights, and I was looking for a program that was small, that program had 20 students, and I felt that I could have more personal attention, and there was a small group and everyone knew each other.
What year is this? Just for context, was this during the life of the Lubavitcher Rebbe? Was he alive at this time?
No. I was born 3 years before he passed away.
Okay.
So I never met him.
Okay, I mean,
but my mother did.
Right. I mean, Crown Heights is you're going from a place, I guess, in Toronto, which was this deaf community. Crown Heights is a busy place. It is hustling. It's bustling 24/7 around the clock.
I loved it. I love that. I miss it.
Oh, really? I mean, how did you?
Yeah, I loved it.
How did you deal with that environment, though?
In Yeshiva, I really did mostly independent learning. I had a class every day, but I really wasn't part of that class because I didn't understand the rabbi and I didn't have an interpreter. So the rabbi would sit with me after each class and he would repeat what he had taught and he would write for me each lesson. And I'm really grateful to him for that. In most of the time, I was learning independently. By myself, writing down questions, asking rabbis, and that was for the most of the time that I was there. They had tests for all the students, and the tests were oral exams. So for me, they gave it to me as a written exam.
I mean, you're in a place where there's thousands of people surrounding you at all times, but because of your circumstance, there might be a feeling of loneliness. Is that true? Where you felt lonely?
In New York, there is a deaf Jewish community, and I would go there on weekends, and I met people. But yes, most of the time, I was really alone. It took time to warm up and to connect to people. And now some of these people that I made connection with then are my friends today. Good things take time.
That's true. We'll be right back this episode in just a second. A quick word to my friends at Kol El Chabad. Guys, this is the Tzedakah Minute, and you got to get this message clear. The power of a single coin. A single coin in a Tzedakah Pushka makes a lot of noise. It seems small, right? But the Baal Shem Tov taught that even the tiniest mitzvah shakes the heavens. And the sound of that jingle is heard in the heavens. So that, my friends, is exactly what happens when you download the Pushka Tzedakah app from Kol Chabad. You give tzedakah, ching, yes, that noise, that jingle. Play it again, Surly. Yes, that's what you want to hear over and over and over again. That is scaring the Yitzhar away. That is shaking the heavens, that noise. So download the Kol Chabad app today and make a donation. At the pushka.cc/meaningful. That is pushka.cc/meaningful. This episode is also sponsored by my friends at Lalechet. We are right there. The summer is just about to be here. And you know what happens in the summer? A lot of trips. Maybe for your shul, maybe for your community, maybe for your family. Now, where is the first place to start when you're doing that? Yes, you guessed it. Lalechet. You're going to head to lalechet.com because the first thing you need to do when planning a trip like this is really figuring out who's going to deal with everything. I know you have that one guy in your chevra who's geschikt. He knows how to make things on the road. He knows how to plan things. He has the map and he knows where to go. And he thought the shul was there, but he was 200 miles off. No more stories. None of that needs to happen. Choose Lalechet and actually enjoy. Actually enjoy. A beautiful trip, a beautiful experience starts with lalechet.com. They will plan your trip from A to Z. You want to go with family, friends, community, you're a gabbai in a shul, A to Z, they will take care of you. Flights, board, food, catering, tour guides, everything. HetelAlechet.com right now. Was there at any point when you go to Crown Heights that you said, this is not a good idea? Like maybe this is too much for me. Maybe I need to go back to a place of just full on comfort.
No. I really wanted to arrive at my goal. I wanted to reach that goal. And that was what motivated me to continue going. Yes. It wasn't easy or simple, but I wanted that goal. So I just kept going until I got there.
I imagine nothing was, you mentioned it wasn't easy, but nothing's easy. What has been easy in your life?
Some things were easy, but I don't give up easily. If it's important to me, if I really want something, I do it.
Yeah, I understand. So you mentioned before being a rabbi is something you wanted. In order to be a rabbi, conventional wisdom tells us you need to go get smicha. What was that process like of you going to get smicha?
That we had tests. And for me, they made them written tests. And instead of sitting with all the students and having an oral examination, the rabbi would ask the other students questions, but he gave it to me as a written exam. And that's how I moved forward in the process, in the program.
And at this point, you're extremely young. You're still You're 20 years old, and you're going for smicha. And I imagine you fully intend to be a rabbi specifically for the deaf community. Was that your intention?
Yes.
And there's not many of those that exist even today. Is that correct?
I'm the 5th deaf rabbi.
5th, you said?
5th, right.
Wow.
In America.
In America. Okay. How many deaf Jews are there in America?
About 15 to 20,000 deaf Jews who know sign language. And there are a lot more who have hearing loss or who are hard of hearing or don't know sign language.
Okay, so
that's the 10% of the population that has hearing loss.
Right. So that's a big responsibility. If we're talking 15,000 deaf Jews in America, and there's only 5 deaf rabbis that are there to teach them, that's quite a lot on the shoulders.
Yes. And not just that. Deaf Jews don't wait for us to show up. I know deaf Jews who are looking for spirituality and they're not getting access. So in the Jewish community, so they wind up in church. I know deaf Jews who go to church, and it's really hard for me to hear that.
Yeah, that's very.
But they're in church. They're very welcoming, and they have free pizza. They have free pizza, and they have access to interpreters, and it's very friendly. It's a problem. So also in Israel, we have a challenge with J witnesses. So It's like a cult. They're really targeting deaf Jews to join their group.
Well, first of all, this is unacceptable that the church is beating us in free food in this space. Like, no one beats the Jews in free food. That can't be. So we got to do something about that. That's A. I think we can get on that quick. But secondly, it's such a unique issue that right? It's such a unique issue I never knew about. The fact that, listen, the church may have a ton more resources and the ability to create such program like this. There are probably tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of more deaf Christians than there are Jews, just because there are millions of more Christians in the world. Did that go into your decision making when you were deciding, I want to be a rabbi? And as you're going along this process, you're understanding there's nobody for the deaf community, the deaf Jewish community. I'm not just making the Torah accessible for deaf Jews. I am saving their Yiddishkeit because their future generations are at risk right now.
I felt that was an important part of my responsibility, yes. I went to a conference, a Jewish deaf conference, and I was sitting there, and one of the people on the stage, he asked, "Do you know someone who goes to church?" And I looked behind me, and everybody had raised their hands. Everybody knew some deaf Jew who had gone to church. That made a big impact on me. The point was, Jewish people want to connect with something spiritual. And if there's a community that opens their door, then they'll go in. They're looking elsewhere and not looking in the Jewish community for that.
That's very sad. It's very sad because it does make sense. As humans, people want community. They want connection. And naturally, if they're not going to find it in one area, they're going to go look in another. You live in one community now. Are there things you're doing online that is sort of casting a wider net to try to showcase to the whole, wide Jewish deaf community that we have something for you?
Yes. We make a lot of videos and classes online because most Jewish communities are local. There's a physical area where everybody lives around that. And there's a synagogue and people live around it. But the deaf Jewish community is global. It's around the world. So we're trying to expand our outreach to people all over the world.
Well, I'm hoping, this interview helps do that. I mean, part of the reason I wanted to do this is, first of all,
I'm sure it will be part.
Hopefully, yeah.
I appreciate you making that effort.
Of course. I mean, I was, by the Kinnis HaShluchim, and I saw you, Rabbi Soudakoff, get up on stage and speak, and I saw the video, and I was blown away. I was blown away. For all of the people in attendance, it was completely silent, but the impact and the what was communicated was so large. It was so much larger than any words that can be spoken. And it really touched me. I think one of the things that jumped out is they showed a video, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe had said that he does not believe in using the term disability. It's a term of inferiority. He doesn't even believe in it. When you heard those words, what did that do for you?
I thought I have more work to do. I have work to do. Now I'm not just sitting waiting for someone to help me. Now I need to go out and do that more. And that's a good thing. To change our activities and our participants in society. They're not just people who need help. We can give help to other people. Disabled people are not people that just need to be helped. They're people that can give back to the community. That was a very empowering message.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the fact you yourself are a walking example of this. Before we get you back to this episode, there is a new incredible project in the works happening in Beit Shemesh, a new community. And if you have Aliyah on your mind, you better listen closely. Eden Beit Shemesh. This is a new community that's being led by Rabbi Benny and Chani Krohn from Teaneck. This community will be all ready in 5 years. Views, specs, pricing, the family atmosphere. So many have already committed. And they said, we're making Aliyah. We are going to be living there. And you have the opportunity to do that as well. I'm going to show you this short video right now. After you watch, get a link in the show notes down below and find out more how you can make a dream come true and move to Eden Beit Shemesh.
I think that all of us have felt over the past year plus this uniquely special connection to the people of Israel, to Am Yisrael, to Eretz Yisrael, in a way that many of us have never felt before.
Thousands gathered in solidarity with Israel from the stage.
And I think we feel that we want to be connected, yes, to the land, yes, to the people, but really to the future of Am Yisrael, which is going to be taking place in Israel. And I think this opportunity to build a new community together in the state of Israel at a time like this is just an incredibly special thing to be able to do. Making Aliyah is hard. And it doesn't matter the stage of life, whether you're coming to Israel with little children, with older children, retirement age, but to do it together really gives a sense of comfort, a sense we can rely on each other, we have shoulders to lean on, and we're not the only one doing it, is really a very powerful thing. I think we're all feeling a unique pull right now back to the land of Israel. This is an opportunity to not only make Aliyah, which of course itself is an incredible thing to do, but to build a new community in Israel. Now is the time, and Eden is the place.
Pesach prep is intense. We know, trust me, we know. The last thing that you want to be stressed about, though, is the wine. That is where kosherwine.com comes in. They are the #1 spot for kosher Pesach wines, and they make it ridiculously easy. I was recently talking to my friend, and he just told me that he placed his order at kosherwines.com, and I'm like trying to get an invite for the Seder, but don't worry, I'll be at Pesach with Bordeaux. But I'm sure they're getting their wine at kosherwine.com, because who doesn't get their wine at kosherwine.com? Nationwide shipping? Check. Expert picks? Check. One-click Pesach mixed cases? Check. And if you're heading to Orlando for Pesach, get this. White glove delivery to your villa. Yeah, that's legit. That means you pick your date online when you want it to get there, and they'll make sure it gets to you on time. Talking about delivery, they ship for free when you order 15 bottles or more. That's a great deal to make sure that you are stocked for the Sidarim. So no schlepping, no last minute runs. Make your Pesach smoother with kosherwine.com. Make sure to use promo code MM15 for $15 off your order. That's over $300. That is MM15 at kosherwine.com. I bet you never imagined that you would one day be on a stage ultimately speaking to over 5,000 rabbis.
Yes. Someone told me that when I got up on the stage, everyone was like, they said they were thinking to themselves, how am I going to understand what he says? You're standing there and it's quiet, and how am I going to understand? They didn't realize that I have an interpreter. And I thought about people who don't realize that interpreter is a service for both sides. You want to understand me, and I want to understand you.
Right. No, that's true.
So interpreter is not helping me. It's really helping both of us.
No, it's true. I mean, at this point, back to, Crown Heights, you are getting older. And when that happens, you begin to date. You begin to thinking about, okay, who am I going to spend the rest of my life with? What did that dating process look like for you?
When I started to date, I started to look what the options were out there, and there weren't many. It's a very small community. And I wanted to meet someone who was deaf. And it was important to me to have full communication, that we have the same culture and the same language. And the pool of options is very limited. It still is. For me, and I have a lot of friends who are still looking for a shidduch. And it's a big challenge for Jewish people. I remember I went to one shadchanit, a matchmaker, and she was specialized in people with disabilities. And I was sitting with her, and she asked me, what do you want? What are you looking for? And she said, do you want to meet a girl who is in a wheelchair? And I said, a wheelchair is doesn't bother me, but how would I communicate with her? She doesn't know sign language. How would I communicate? What would be the connection between us? And I told her, I've met many hearing people. And she said, yeah, you've met many hearing people? I've met many hearing people who don't have disabilities. And the matchmaker said she didn't have any issues. No, she knew sign language from her parents. And the matchmaker, she missed the point that two people, they need to have a connection between them. It's not just throwing two people who have different disabilities together and figuring out how to make that work.
Right. And that makes a whole lot of sense. So what do you do?
It happens a lot that they say, okay, you have something and you have a different disability, so maybe you need to accept each other. But in our case, it's not a good recipe for a relationship, I think.
You should know it happens beyond just abilities and disabilities. It happens with money. It happens with height. It happens with everything along the dating world. For better or for worse. It's a whole different discussion, but I'm curious how you went on to meet your wife.
I have a friend who today is my wife. So through him, she was working in a daycare program, and my friend's daughter was in that program. And my friend knew me, and he tried to match us up. But my wife is Israeli, and I was in America at that time. I was living in Crown Heights. And my friend tried to figure out how to get us to meet. And she said, I don't want to meet someone from America. And I said, hey, it's fine with me to meet. So it took half a year. And finally she said, okay, we'll meet. Let's see. And the rest is history. The first question that she asked me before I flew to meet her, she asked me, do you see yourself living in Israel? And I said, I thought that question for me was like a moment where I stopped. I thought, on one hand, I answered, for sure, I'd love to live in Israel. But I lived in America and I felt comfortable in the American community, and I had a non-for-profit organization in America. And I said, yes, I see myself living in Israel. And now I'm living here 8 years, and I really love every minute.
So you pretty much decided to make Aliyah in around 7 seconds on the phone when a girl you were about to date asked you.
Yes. Well, I did try to convince her to live in America after we met, but she came to New York and she said, it's beautiful, it's lovely, but I'm staying in Israel. And she's right.
That's the dream. I mean, your wife is someone who hears, who speaks. I think it's an inspiring story.
She's deaf, and
Okay.
she has 2 cochlear implants. And she grew up in a different background than me. She is part of a hearing family. Her parents are hearing, and there was no other deaf person in her family. And the year that we were together, I saw our different families and how each family looks at deafness in a very different way. And our deaf identity is different. I grew up in a family where I understood everything that was going on around me. My parents didn't have a private conversation. We watched everything that happened between them. If they wanted to speak privately, they had to go to a separate room. But my wife's family, she would sit at the Shabbos table, and I'd ask my wife, what are they saying? And she'd answer me, I don't know. For me, it was so hard to see someone who was okay with not understanding what her parents said. I understood everything growing up. I was part of all the action. I was part of it. It was a very different upbringing.
That's really a blessing. I mean, although I wonder if your parents and our parents, if they were having a conversation and they didn't want us to hear it, they maybe switch and start speaking Yiddish. Did your parents like start signing in Yiddish, like if they didn't want you to understand what they were saying?
No, there's no Yiddish sign language.
Not yet. Not yet. Not yet.
That's an idea.
Guys, it is super important that you stop what you're doing right now. You hit the link in the show notes below. Take a pause right now. And you're going to vote for Eretz HaKodesh in the World Zionist Congress. Okay, it is extremely important during these elections, which is running out, the time is running out, that you vote for Eretz HaKodesh. Do you value the fact that there is a mechitza at the Kaisel? Do you value the fact that people are able to sit in Eretz Yisrael and learn that the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael exists in a strong way, that it's protected, that, you can go to a concert and be separate seating. You like those things? You value those things? That is Eretz HaKodesh's ticket. Okay? We need to make sure that they get more votes than they ever had before. 5 years ago was the first time they even got involved in this. Guys, over $2 billion is given out to organizations. And Eretz HaKodesh is advocating for the organizations that focus on Frum Yidden, the Orthodox Jews. Not to conservative Jewry, not to Reform Jewry. Okay? It is super important that organizations that value the Frum Yidden are supported, that the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael is maintained. So it takes 3 minutes. You're going to go to Eretz HaKodesh's website right now. Hit the link in the show notes below. Vote. Vote, vote, vote. Your vote matters. They got 25,000 votes 5 years ago, and they got a big say. We are going for 100,000 this year. 100,000 votes. And it's only possible if you join me and vote. Go ahead. You can make the difference. This episode is also sponsored by Kosher Providence. Yes, guys, you may want to think about moving. Get out of the rat race. No more, like our good friend Shirley Rozelle said, you got to make 300, 350 to make it in the in-town communities. Well, Providence could be for you. And they are continuing their amazing recruitment. If you move to Providence, Rhode Island, they are going to contribute $50,000 to your house purchase and a free tuition at Providence Hebrew Day School for your children in the first year. How awesome is that? Definitely should get you thinking about, well, what is in Providence? So what is Providence all about? Well, Providence is a very safe and warm place. That's something you should know. I actually was in Providence not too long ago in the summer. Beautiful place. Houses are affordable. They are nice. Providence is only 1 hour from Boston, 3 hours from New York. You can get in the car and you could be there in 1 or 2 of these episodes, just like that. Providence is a beautiful, new, upcoming Orthodox community. The school there is an Orthodox school that's been around since 1946. It's a beautiful place, and you and your family could think about, maybe this could be home. You can head to providencetorah.com. That is providencetorah.com, and find out if this could be your home. Until then, I hope you enjoy this episode with Lipa Schmelzer. So you guys get married and you move to Eretz Yisrael. It's my understanding there are 15,000 deaf people in Eretz Yisrael. So it's still, how many deaf rabbis are there in Eretz Yisrael?
Just one.
Just you.
Yeah.
So
when I moved here,
yeah,
I met deaf people and they asked me, so what do you do? And I said, I'm a rabbi. And they said, oh, I didn't know you were hearing. And I said, no, I'm deaf. And they said, what? How could you be a rabbi? A rabbi has to be hearing. And I said, no. It was very interesting, that conversation that I had with a number of people, that people didn't understand that in America, that I never had that kind of conversation in America. A deaf rabbi, people said, cool. My parents, when they got married, there was a deaf rabbi who married them. And that was years ago. And here, it was something so new to them. Now I've been here 8 years, and that question is not popping up anymore. People now understand deaf people can do anything.
And you have 15,000 students, or potential students.
Yep. And I think with this interview, I have many more people who can learn from us also. That's
100% true.
Not just deaf people.
100%. 100%. There's an organization that you started, right?
Just a second. I lost my earring. My
no problem.
head earpiece. We're back with you.
What?
I became deaf for a second.
The organization that you started, that is Hushim Ben Dan?
That's right.
So tell me about what that is, what you guys do, and what the goal is.
So we want to make Judaism accessible for deaf people. That's our goal. We want to do programs and give different opportunities that hearing people have and make them accessible for deaf people. So, for example, we have holiday programs and prayers for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, just like hearing people go to synagogue. So we have a service also in sign language here. For Purim, we have Megillah reading, and we have someone who reads from a kosher Megillah. And we also have a screen where we project our translation of Megillat Esther in sign language. So simultaneously, you're hearing, those that can hear are hearing the Megillah, and you can also watch the translation. We want deaf people to appreciate their connection. We want them to love being Jewish. We want them to do mitzvot with joy, with love. That's our goal.
What I'm hearing, and this is 45 minutes that I've known you, but what I'm hearing is that you have such a positive outlook and you don't have the negative aspect of it, meaning a term that people use in our world is, hearing impaired, meaning that they have impaired hearing. But it doesn't seem like you look at it like that. It doesn't seem like you look at yourself as you missing something. You just have something different.
Yes. Hearing impaired, many deaf people feel that that's a term that puts the emphasis on what you don't have. So in university, the Gallaudet University, so that's a deaf university in Washington, D.C., they have a field of study called deaf gain. And they study how being deaf gives you advantages. It's a very interesting study. I really connected to that concept. Everyone is different. Everyone has different strengths. And for deaf people, they don't have hearing, but they have other areas where they can excel and focus on them.
Do you also have people reaching out to you that maybe are part of, the hearing community, but maybe they have a child who early on is showing signs of maybe not being able to hear? And how do you advise them as a rabbi, as a person who's on this side of things?
Many times I speak with parents of deaf children. And each family is going through different challenges, but sometimes parents ask me for resources for their children. They want to look for Jewish videos, or they want to teach them how to sign blessings. And really, I think that's something that we really need to invest a lot in, because we don't have enough people who want to use those resources, prayers, blessings, how to use sign language in Jewish life. Many kids, Jewish kids, who go to deaf schools, often they're the only deaf Jew in their class, and they don't have Jewish role models. And they need that exposure. And they need access to Jewish life through videos. If not in person, then at least through a video that they could learn.
And that's sort of it seems like that was what the Rebbe spoke about, is someone who had a disability wasn't, putter, or the Yiddishkeit wasn't not for them. And it seems like that's what your mission is. Your goal is to make people who are deaf understand that, no, Yiddishkeit is just as much as for you as it is for anybody else.
Absolutely. And I want to say something about the people that don't realize it's just not about deaf people. It's also about hearing people. Remember, most deaf Jews have hearing children. So if the deaf parents are not connected to their Judaism, do you think their hearing children will be? No, it's not going to happen. It affects all of us.
Do you view yourself as a shliach of the Rebbe? I see the Rebbe behind you on the wall over there. Do you view yourself as doing a shlichus?
Yes, for sure. I try my best to bring his vision to action.
So what is the next step? What is going on in current day?
Chushim ben Dan, the first initials of the words are Chabad, Chet Bet Daled, if you didn't notice. So Chushim, he was a deaf person from the days of Jacob, Yaakov. He is one of his grandchildren. And there's a story about him in the Midrash. And the point of the story is showing that his motivation, his actions, he took action instead of just sitting and waiting for people to help him. And not only that, there was an issue that hearing people around him were struggling with, and he took action and he solved it. So I think that approach is the same here. We want to empower deaf people to take action and responsibility for their own Jewish life.
What would you say to people who are watching this and listening to this? If you can give them any advice on how to be more inclusive to deaf Jews, to the community that you're really running and creating, what can we do to be more sensitive?
When you meet a deaf person for the first time, show him patience. I speak for myself. If I'm trying to talk with someone and I see they have no patience for me, so I just let go. I just stop. I don't want to bother the person. So when you want to make connections with people, when you see someone who has patience and motivation to make that connection, you feel it. Yes, it takes longer and more effort than just making contact with someone who's not deaf, but it's worth it.
Is there someone in your life that you'd like to show how far that you've come?
You mean people in our community?
It could be anyone. It could be parents, it could be grandparents, it could be a Rebbe from back in the day, that if you had the ability to show them where Yehoshua Soudakoff is today, who would that be?
Anyone and everyone. I'm not doing something to show people. I'm doing what I think is the right thing to do.
And the mission of Chushim ben Dan is to just make Yiddishkeit more accessible to people who are dealing with this. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
So what does the future look like? If you could map out the next 5-10 years, what would you want it to look like?
I would love to see more people involved in our community, more people leading programs. For example, we have a summer camp for about 10 years already. And now we're starting to have kids who were campers and they're becoming counselors. So it's a wonderful thing to see. Kids that got from our camp give back to the same community. And I want to do the same kind of thing for other things in our community, that deaf people from within the community would lead lessons or programs. That's something that's very important, that we have more natural deaf leadership, not just have people from outside who help us, but even though it's really great to have that, still there's a feeling of separation. And when a deaf kid looks at a hearing person, he says, okay, he's doing great, but he's hearing and I'm deaf. And maybe I can't do what he does. But if you have a deaf person leading, there are no excuses. You see, a deaf person can do it. I can do it too. It's a different feeling. And we have many, many ideas. The sky is the limit. We have a full world out there. And if there are resources, if there are funds, then we can make these things happen.
It's quite the position that you're in because you have such a responsibility. You are teaching Torah to an entire community that won't be able to get it unless you are doing it. Do you understand the yoke of that responsibility?
There are some other options, but yes, I feel I have an obligation to do as much as I can. And I look at it one day at a time. When I'm at A, I'm thinking how to get to B. I'm encouraging people to start the journey, to make one step at a time. I'm not looking for the end result. I'm looking how each person can grow in their own way. And when people feel that they have room for growth and they're not under pressure, then they will grow. They will.
For that boy or girl, man or woman that's watching this, and maybe they're deaf, maybe they're dealing with something else, and they're feeling lonely, they're feeling down on their luck, and they've stumbled upon this episode. What message would the rabbi want to give to that person?
Each person is born with different skills and different capabilities. And we should not waste our time looking at other people and how they're successful and how they live their lives. That's their life. And we should look at ourselves and see how we can use our set of tools and skills and abilities and how we can succeed with these. That's our life work, the work of every individual. Not to waste our time looking around. Just focus on what we can do.
That's beautiful. And last thing, I know Purim is coming up, or maybe by the time this airs, it is Purim around the corner. It just was. What does Purim look like in the deaf community?
So we have a Megillah reading for the deaf community. People come here. Somebody reads from the Megillah, and we have a video of a translation of the entire Megillah. We did that a few years ago. We translated. So we project this movie, and someone reads at the same time as the video is going. And it's simultaneously, word for word. It's a very special experience. The Megillah really comes to life visually. And we have a party for children and for different groups in the community, and a meal and mishloach manot.
Amazing. That's beautiful. Well, you're somebody that has to speak to many different people who speak different languages, English, Hebrew, maybe Russian, and that comes with its own sign language. So how do you integrate that? How do you, first of all, learn all that, and then I guess mix it in?
It's a good question. American Sign Language is my native language. I grew up using ASL. And Israeli Sign Language, I learned before I came to Israel in the yeshiva. I learned a lot more when I arrived in Israel also. And Russian Sign Language is something I picked up from summer camp. I worked in Moscow 2 summers, and I started learning Russian Sign Language there. And then I continued in order to stay in contact with the Russian community. And when I meet a deaf Jew, it's important for me to make that connection. And that connection is through their native language. So it's important that it be in his native sign language. For events in Israel, we use Israeli Sign Language. For American events, we use American Sign Language. And sometimes people say, oh, I want to have an event. It's tough to make everybody happy. You can't speak 2 languages at the same time. But For big events, we have different interpreters who translate to Russian Sign Language or to American Sign Language, depends on the event. So it's important for us that all parts of our deaf Jewish community are included.
Amazing. That's really cool. Can you tell me something about the Torah translation project that you have?
Sure. About 6 years ago, we had a grant to translate the Jewish Bible, to the Tanakh, to Israeli Sign Language. And we started doing that, and we've been doing it for 6 years now. And we have videos for the book of Genesis, for Breshit, for a Megillat Esther, for Megillat Echad, the book of Lamentations, the book of Esther. And it's really amazing to see how much impact it has on the deaf community. For example, when I teach kids for their bar mitzvah, and before then we have videos of the parsha, the Torah portion that they're learning. So they can open the Chumash and we can read. And when we finish, once upon a time, we just finished and closed the book. But now we have a video. So I can open up my laptop and I can show the part that we're learning, and we can pause. And often the boy that I'm learning with, he'll say, don't pause. Let's keep watching the video. It makes a big difference. It speaks to us. It's our language. We have actors who stand and sign, and they're signing the Torah portion, and the Torah comes to life.
That's amazing.
It's something very special that we have for the deaf community. And it's an honor to be part of that effort. It's a gift for Jewish Jews. And we have it online. It's for free. And it has captions and a voiceover also. And everyone can enjoy it. Hearing people, deaf people, everyone.
What's shul like? What's the shul look like with all the congregants and the chazan, and what's that look like?
So here we have a Chabad house, and most of the time we have high holiday prayers. We have a person who's hard of hearing who davens using his voice, and on the side I stand and I sign at the same time. And we have men and women and a mechitza, and everyone knows where we're holding, what page we're on, what we're saying. And some prayers we can say together. It's a different feeling. Here, you don't get lost. You don't need to catch up. And we need a minyan. It's not like in synagogue that a deaf person isn't needed and I could come or go and it doesn't make a difference. If I'm not there, they'll just keep going. But here, you need every person. So people need to stay so that we keep the minyan. We really need everybody's an active participant.
That's really beautiful, because all people really want is to be needed. That's an important part of community. And that's something that we can learn from your community.
Absolutely.
Okay. Rabbi Soudakoff, thank you so much. I know it's probably evening already there. Have a great night. It was so nice to meet you. I hope to meet you in person one day.
I hope so too. Thank you. Come to visit our Chabad house. We're looking forward to you coming. Come to see where the magic happens.
Only if you have free pizza, though.
We have more than that.
You got a deal. Rabbi Soudakoff, thank you so much for joining us and telling us your story, sharing with us your mission. So I hope that people listen to this and they watch this and they understand that we have way more alike than we have differences. And I hope people can support the work, the holy work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for having this conversation with me.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you all so much for listening or watching this episode. Please make sure to leave a comment, enter that giveaway. We'd love for you to win. Also, you want to get your hands in the Meaningful People game? Well, here's something for you. Head to meaningfulminute.org/the game right now and get it before Pesach. It will uplift your 3-day yontif. Yes, I said that right. A 3-day yontif. Guys, a 3-day yontif. You need stuff to do. This game is perfect. meaningfulminute.org/the game. We might be dropping it on sale. We might have a promo code. In order to see that, you need to join one of our Meaningful Minute Plus groups. Hit the link in the show notes below. Join that group. 5,000 others are on there, and they're getting real-time updates and new content, fresh, exclusive content as it drops. So hit those links. Join us in all different capacities, my friends. We have another episode coming your way next week, an important one, a beautiful one, a heartfelt one. Until then, this was Rabbi Yehoshua Soudakoff, incredible Yid, and this is the Meaningful People Podcast.